Well, the outcome of Taiwan's election could have consequences for the global economy as China becomes increasingly assertive. Taiwan is a hub for computer chips. TSMC produces about 90% of the world's leading semiconductors used in smartphones, cars, even military drones. Foreign investors appear nervous about the outcome of this weekend's election. Taiwanese stocks are down in the year to Friday. Well, joining me now is Rupert Hammond-Chambers, President of the US-Taiwan Business Council. So great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. As we've just seen our reporter there, Will Ripley, describing how China has said that the ruling party candidate in Taiwan is dangerous. And it just brings the question, I'm sure, the voting citizens are watching on, seeing the threat from China and saying, to what extent people voting based on internal domestic realities versus a candidate that could be a strong buffer to China, for example?
Eleni, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think what the Chinese object to most, or the Chinese Communist Party object to most, is Taiwan's democracy is sitting 90 to 100 miles off the coast of China. You have one of the most vibrant, active and successful democracies in the modern world at the moment. And every 4 years, that democracy is practiced loud and clearly, and we're seeing that play out right now. It is deeply unfortunate that when Tsai Ing-wen was elected in 2016, the Chinese rejected the opportunity to continue to talk with her after the people of Taiwan had elected her as their leader. And we are faced with the possibility, if the polls are to be believed and Lai Ching-te is elected tomorrow in Taiwan, that the Chinese will do that again and reject the opportunity to embrace and to dialogue with the duly elected president of the country.
Well, is this election going to affect China's policy towards Taiwan? Does Beijing have a preferred candidate?
Yes, I think that in the long term, the Chinese obviously have a strategy towards absorbing Taiwan. The outcome of this election certainly will impact the next 4 years. There's no doubt about that. If Lai Ching-te is elected, there will be continuity in DPP rule. But there is also the prospect that the parliament, or Li Fa-yuen in Taiwan, will switch from DPP control to KMT TPP control. And we will have, for the first time in 20 years, a balance of power between the legislative and executive branches. The extent to which the Chinese choose to react to Lai Ching-te's election, I think, is the big question. And Eleni, obviously, what you're driving at, what might we reasonably expect in reaction to this? It's likely that they will continue to refuse to talk with Taiwan in the absence of the DPP embracing the so-called 1992 consensus and the prospect of one country, two systems. And it's likely also that they'll look at some punitive measures, possibly economic. There's an economic agreement that's 10 plus years in standing called the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement. We may see some disruption there. So there is a possibility that China will react. And of course, we've seen plenty of military activity around the island, most noticeable in the recent past, after then US Speaker Mrs. Pelosi visited Taiwan and the Chinese launched significant military maneuvers around the island.
Certainly not afraid to show its stance on that. And look, it's been upping its rhetoric about reunification as well. But what does this mean? Does this mean war? Does it mean military force? Does this mean perhaps more covert ways of putting pressure on Taiwan in terms of, hamstringing vessels passing through the Taiwan Strait, for example? How are you seeing this playing out? Because the US and Japan likely to get involved if things do go bad. Yeah.
I don't think it accelerates the issue of war per se. If that's the concern, would a Lai Ching-te victory result in the prospect of China attacking Taiwan on a shorter time frame than perhaps they are considering right now? It's the Chinese primarily that put it in these stark terms about peace and war. Their strategy to date in regards to absorbing Taiwan is much more long term. If you're sitting in Beijing and you're canceling Xi Jinping, or you're Xi Jinping, you're looking at a number of different trend lines that might encourage you that slowly but surely the pressure you're applying on Taiwan, the military pressure, economic pressure, political pressure, pressure around Taiwan's international space are all suffocating Taiwan to a point where in the future, maybe not the next 4 years, but in the foreseeable future, Taiwan would be forced to accept a relationship with China along Beijing's lines.
Rupert, great to have you on. Thank you so very much for breaking that down for us. We'll be speaking soon, I'm sure, based on what we see over the weekend. Much appreciated.